You're listening to episode 27 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness researchers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Teacher and coach Alex Peavey joins us to speak about his Mindful Living program at Collegiate School in Richmond, Virginia. How many of us have noticed an improvement in our sports performance with a little bit of mindfulness practice? How many of us have even thought to try? Today's guest has learned those lessons well and has created a program to share mindfulness with students, faculty, and staff at the high school level. Alex Peavey is an upper school counselor and the head boys varsity basketball coach at Collegiate School in Richmond, Virginia. In addition to counseling during the day, he teaches an Introduction to Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction class to the freshmen as part of their health and wellness curriculum. Alex has also offered similar classes to the faculty and staff at Collegiate for their professional development, with the intention of cultivating an environment of mindful educators. In the 2011 to 2012 school year, mindfulness classes were also opened up to parents and the extended community. Outside of Collegiate, Alex has spoken on the topic of mindfulness in education and society to the faculty of various area public school systems. Alex's educational background includes a BA in psychology from UVA, an MS in sports leadership from VCU, and most recently, an MEd in counselor education from VCU. And our guest today is Alex Peavey. Alex, thanks for joining us on Present Moment.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
So we met a couple of years ago at the International Scientific Conference, and we ran into each other again a few weeks ago as of this recording. And you gave an outstanding talk on the work that you're doing. And before we dive into that, which is the main topic of today's conversation, tell us a little bit about your background, what your first introduction to mindfulness was.
Well, for me, my kind of intro to mindfulness is through sports, really. I've always played sports and enjoyed sports and have been intrigued by the sports psychology of sports because it's applicable beyond the field or the court. So it was actually back in high school for me when I was playing basketball and now I coach basketball to give the long-term timeline of it. But I read a book by Phil Jackson, and I think it was after the Chicago Bulls had won 3 of their world championships with the Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen teams and all of them. And I purchased this book called Sacred Hoops by the head coach, Phil Jackson, and thought I was just getting a book about basketball. I really didn't know the depth of it. And then I get into the book, and what I thought was going to be about the previous couple seasons of championships all of a sudden turned into this entire description of Phil Jackson, mindfulness, and how he applied mindfulness to the Chicago Bulls, but also how it was a constant theme throughout his life. Even before he knew kind of what that word was, he was already doing it as a kind of his own background growing up, as well as then as a player with the Knicks, and then certainly when he became head coach, and introduced the topic to me through that book. And certainly became intrigued and then started listening to things that Michael Jordan would say about it in regards to the impact it had on his game and how that really was such a thing that took everything he was already doing to the next level. So that's what originally planted the seed. And then right about the same time, I happened to do a trip out west. I was fortunate enough to go on that was kind of the outward bound type of trip. It wasn't by outward bound. It was a smaller organization where we were hiking, camping, and just a group of us high school age kids. And on that trip, they also kind of incorporated meditation and mindfulness. So all of a sudden, I was like, oh, I'm doing right now what that book was talking about. On that trip, they had us reading other books along the way when the opportunity arose to read. And there were things like The Giving Tree and others. And then Siddhartha was one of the books. And so all of a sudden, these pieces started falling together, and it all very much intrigued me. And just kind of continued to have an interest in it and continued to have what I felt like was my own very generic, basic teenage version of a practice without any real outside guide other than this book and what I learned on the trip. And then went on to college and went to the University of Virginia, where my major was in psychology. A lot again rooted in the interest that kind of started through through the awareness of some just sports psychology and then the awareness of mindfulness. But as I said, how I started to recognize how applies beyond just the sport itself and how it's applicable in life. And so my desire at that point was to become a coach, because I certainly wasn't good enough to be a player. And so that was my pursuit, but it was always within the back of my mind, this intrigue of Phil Jackson's approach. So I went through UVA and had a chance to work with the football team and did stats for basketball and did other things that eventually led me to going to Virginia Commonwealth University for grad school for sports leadership, and then on to coach 4 years of college basketball at Wofford College in South Carolina. And all during this time, I'm still following Phil Jackson, the Bulls, and then eventually, obviously, went over to the Lakers. But he was continuing to do and apply this to the teams he coached. And the thing that they kept talking about, the players, was, again, how they applied it beyond just the season. It wasn't a switch they turned on and off. It was something that then kind of permeated throughout their entire life. And that the assistant coaches that, didn't have to do it with the team started doing it, and again, bringing it to their own families. And it was just a way of living, a healthy way of living. And so then I went from Wofford to Collegiate school, which is in Richmond, Virginia, and had the opportunity to transition from college basketball to high school basketball, because I found the more I coached college and a lot of what you do is recruiting. The more I recruited, the more I wanted to just be at the high school level where you don't have to go out and recruit, where all your time is spent coaching. And that's relevant because to me, it's the interaction with the players you have that I value the most, not searching for other players, but the interactions you have. And that's where, again, the venue to come to a school and then apply this practice simply with a basketball team. But first start with basketball, let them know who I am and what I'm about from a basketball level. And then once they have that feeling, the intention at that point was to start incorporating mindfulness to our basketball team on a very subtle level, more of a sports psychology approach. Again, that's kind of the evolution for me at the very beginnings that eventually got me to Collegiate.
And tell us about Collegiate School itself. What is that? What's your role there?
It's a K through 12, kindergarten through 12th grade independent school in Richmond, Virginia. It's a day school, so there's no boarding there, and it's co-ed, right about 50-50 guys and girls. And actually, it'll be 100 years old next year, so it's an older school, and it's one of the larger independent schools. I'm in the upper school, the high school portion, as the upper school counselor for the 9th through 12th graders, and that's about 550 kids total in the upper school part. And so my two main roles, or I guess three main roles now, are, as I said, head boys varsity basketball coach and upper school counselor. And that's more like a personal counselor. We have separate college counseling. We have advisors who do the curriculum. We have, all that kind of stuff is taken care of elsewhere. I deal with seeing kids who come to me with whatever their day-to-day issues are, and certainly putting out referrals if need to for outside help, more of just being a constant presence for anybody who needs it. And along with that has evolved in the last, I've been there 10 years now. And in the last, I think it's 7 years, I've had the opportunity to teach mindfulness as a freshman class. And so that's kind of where it began to integrate. But Collegiate itself, one thing I need to point out is it's definitely it's a very high achieving school. We have outstanding kids. It really blows my mind because I don't mean to overstate it, but they're really good at everything. We just had a symphony performance the other day, and they were doing Phantom of the Opera, and you close your eyes, you wouldn't know you weren't at the real thing in New York. And you watch our athletic teams play. I mean, we have kids 20, 15, 20, sometimes 30 kids a year going on to play college sports. But these are kids that, again, we didn't recruit. Most of them have gone to our school since kindergarten and got athletes like Russell Wilson, who, just won the Super Bowl for the Seahawks this past year. Again, he's another one who went to Collegiate his whole life. And those are the type of kids graduating. But then we also have, a range of unique graduates like some of the writers for the Cleveland Show and the Family Guy, the producer of Beast of the Southern Wild, Dave Schools from Widespread Panic. He's the bass player in that band. So it's like this wide range of kids that are so successful in whatever they do, whatever their chosen interest is. And the school is so great about celebrating their interest. And it's also neat because you can be the star on the football team and the lead in the school play. You're able to do it all here. But with all of that comes a little bit of stress because it's so high achieving. And so it's pretty competitive internally and externally. And again, that's where a little bit of the mindfulness idea came about, is to balance what is a great thing, like Michael Jordan. Hey, great success. You're a very good basketball player, but you also need to take care of yourself in the process to be able to maintain that success.
So tell us about these two worlds of yours, the mindfulness practice that you'd had for so long and your work at collegiate school, how those came together, because you also attended some professional training on mindfulness to help make that more robust. Tell us that story.
Well, basically, again, I kind of began doing it once I had gotten a couple years under my belt at the school of good old X's and O's basketball coaching and established what we're doing as a program. I began to integrate mindfulness in ways that the kids could deal with just performance anxiety and simple things like if a play goes wrong, you can clap your hands once and kind of notice the texture of your hands, hear the sound of the clap, or maybe it's in basketball a lot, you got to wipe the dust off the bottom of your shoes so it doesn't get slick on the court, but make that a mindfulness practice, much like we hear about John Kabat-Zinn talking about training doctors to make scrubbing in prior to surgery a mindful practice. Like, use that opportunity, take something you already do and do it mindfully as almost a grounding instrument, in the sense that you achieve full presence with that. And that's where you're able to do whatever it is you need to do in that moment, whether it's sitting in meditation or surgery as a doctor, or in my case, guys playing basketball. And so we would talk about different ways that, again, in the moment of adversity, of the crowd yelling at you, of shooting an air ball or throwing a turnover or whatever it is you just did, how do you respond in a way that the last play doesn't negatively affect the next play? And so you don't tune it, you don't force it out, you don't ignore it and act like it didn't happen. It's that mindful practice of acknowledging it exists, letting it go, and using one of your five senses to tune back into the present to be here for the next play. And what evolved, I believe, and what others seem to have seen, was a really strong resiliency within our players, and to where no matter the score, no matter the situation, I mean, it could be, it's funny talking to some parents and other people in the crowd that, we would literally be in a 1 or 2 point game in the final seconds of a championship game of a tournament we'd be in, and our guys would be on the floor smiling and having fun. And, some people think, oh, put your game face on. They had their game face, and their game face was, this is fun. Even adversity is fun because it gives us the opportunity to practice presence. And so we would respond with success as well as challenge in the exact same manner, because all of it provided us with the opportunity to be here. And so there's a practice of gratitude, there's a practice of compassion, there's just also very important self-compassion and realizing that negative reactions and negative thoughts isn't going to help me on my next play. And that's a very tangible, again, A to B thing in the sense that I'm going to do this for the sake of basketball. And so on one level, that might be contrary to mindfulness on a basic level, but it's the application of it in action, in my opinion. And so what happened there was that became a consistent theme for our basketball teams. And our health and wellness director at our school, in the high school, basically we have a health and wellness curriculum where every freshman goes through this curriculum where they do things like driver's ed, drug ed, sex ed, nutrition, Red Cross CPR training, all that stuff. I don't teach any of that, but our health and wellness director and several other teachers teach those things. But this director, Annie Richards, she called around to a few colleges that our students go to, a number of them, and she asked these colleges, just in general, about any incoming freshman college students. She said, what is a life skill that you all think we as any school we need to be teaching? And almost to a T, all of these colleges say, please do something about the stress that incoming freshmen are experiencing across the entire country as they enter college. It was really interesting to her that it just calling colleges in different states of different philosophies, they all ended up with almost the exact same answer. And so she came back with a proposal for a 2-week stress management class. And she said, basically came to me and said, do what you're doing with your basketball team in this class. So that gave me a lot of freedom. And so at that point, I simply took what I knew, my own practice, what I had read from Phil Jackson, and then by noticing who Phil Jackson was referencing in his own books, dove into John Kabat-Zinn's work and just simply reading about it. Attended things like the Mind and Life Institute in Washington, D.C., and started hearing the research behind this stuff and the things that I could come back to my school with that would validate on a research-based level what we were doing. And I took those 2 weeks, and the way the 2 weeks work is I get about 15 to 20 freshmen at a time for 2 consecutive weeks. So it's usually 9 or 10 days, depending on where maybe a holiday falls or something like that, but it's no more than 10 days total consecutively. And I get them once at the middle of the semester. I get them again at the end of the semester, and the same thing in the second semester. I get them halfway through in the end. Each kid only gets the class once, but by the end of the year, I will have had every freshman for 2 weeks. And what's interesting, too, that was an unintended consequence is these classes for freshmen are divided by gender, and that's simply because they get sex ed during these classes as well. So at our school, they divide the kids to teach sex ed. So unintentionally for this mindfulness class, they were divided guys and girls. And so I'll get 15 to 20 kids at a time, and we'll go through what I began as kind of a rusty version of me pulling together what I knew and turning it into a mindfulness class. And it had some pretty good early success anecdotally from our kids. And Collegiate saw what was happening in regards to the success of this, because these kids would then go and they would do some of the things we were practicing. And we were doing very basic stuff like body scan and shorter seated periods, longer seated periods. We do some mindful walking, things like that. And they would start doing these things out on the playing fields before big games. They would do these things. The teacher would walk in a room and the kid might be laying on the floor and they're thinking, what are you doing? And explain this class and what they were doing. And it got to the point where eventually the teachers were seeing it enough, and they were not only seeing kids do it, they started realizing these kids were having success, or these were kids that might have been struggling before that all of a sudden were overcoming some odds. And so the teachers said, when do we get this? We want this. And that's the point. I think it was 1 or 2 years into actually teaching the freshman class where Collegiate said, okay, now we're going to go send you to get some professional training. I actually asked for it. I said, look, this is evolving. It's getting to become a mainstay, and the adults want it. And for this to continue, for me to feel like there's an academic integrity and all that good stuff behind this class, I submitted a proposal to go up to the professional training of the MBSR course with John Kabat-Zinn and Saki Santorelli, and that was, I believe, that was an 8-day training over one summer. And with that, that allowed me to then again come back and expand the teaching to not only the students but to the faculty. And it was interesting because that first year after doing that summer program, our school wanted to try that. We do a lot of professional development at Collegiate. It's very good about supporting the growth of our teachers in any area that they can think of. And this one particular summer, they wanted to try some online professional development. The school did. So they didn't necessarily have topics yet. They just wanted kind of a twofold intention of teachers learning how to use the technology that was evolving at the time and get professional development a topic of interest. So while I'm not as big a fan at the time, or I wasn't, of learning mindfulness online, I saw it as an opportunity to reach a lot of teachers if they wanted it. It was voluntary. They had like, I don't know, 5 or 6 different topics to choose from, like technology or classroom based stuff. But I offered mindfulness through this online summer class, and 97 of our teachers signed up for it. And I think we have something like 150 faculty, I believe it is, K through 12 faculty and staff. And so what we did was I just created these online. I tried to model it after MBSR. I didn't call it MBSR because it certainly wasn't what it was, but I took and broke it down into kind of 8 chapters, if you call it. And they would watch a video, or they would read a prompt, or they would see something from mainstream television or movies and link it to kind of the philosophical underpinnings of mindfulness, and then go out do their own practice related to it and come back and kind of post on this closed site for whoever was involved their experience and what they learned from it, all the good stuff. So that was kind of the first professional development. And a lot of them chose to, it was a suggestion to read John Kabat-Zinn's book, Wherever You Go, There You Are. So that was part of it if they wanted to, and most did. And so that was kind of the beginning of teachers getting it as well as the student. That allowed me to, again, come back and continue evolving with the actual class itself. And that is where it helped me going to that training, formalize, basically take my 9 or 10 days with the kids and on a much more specific level, take the MBSR program that's 8 weeks. And because of the confines of being at a school, yes, I would love to have these kids for 8 weeks, once a week for, 2.5 hours, but I can't. I have to take what I'm given that fits within the school schedule. So I took the MBSR program, mindfulness-based stress reduction program, and adjusted it to where the 8 weeks would occur in the 10 days. And it was very similar sequentially. The first day we simply began with a conversation. I pointed out to the kids, I always point out to say, look, there's no textbook for this class. You are the textbook. And so we want dialogue to start from day one of what is stress? What does that mean to you? And so we talk about stress, and that word, I'm so stressed. What does that mean? And then we talk about examples of things that quote unquote stress them. And I have them say what it stresses them out. Then we talk about, okay, what are the physical symptoms of stress? What do you feel? And that's different for different people. Some people it's sweaty palms. Some people it's faster breathing. What is it that you specifically notice yourself? And so we kind of go through all that discussion so that there's a foundation for what stress means to that class that I'm speaking to that helps drive the following 2 weeks so that they truly feel the class is about them. So while I have a framework and a outline and a curriculum, I definitely make sure the class speaks to the people sitting in the classroom at the time. And that is the key. So each class has its own different little feel to it. And we end the first day actually with a string and washer activity that is ultimately what gets the buy-in from the kids. And I learned it. It was some sports psychology thing. I might have picked it up at a sports psychology class, UVA or something, but I can't remember the origins. But basically, we have a string, just a regular old string, and a small little washer that's about the size of a nickel. And the string is tied to the washer. And I'd say the string might be about 10 inches long. And what I ask the kids to do is hold the string, the washer hanging on the other end, and hold it at about chin level in front of their face with their elbow off the table. And initially try not to let that washer move at all. Just stare at the washer, don't let it move. And then I ask them to begin visualizing while looking at this washer. I want you to visualize, what does this exact washer look like as it swings left to right? Imagine the washer you're staring at is moving back and forth like a pendulum. And inevitably, everybody's washer starts swinging back and forth, left to right, even though I've told them not to try to let it move. Then I say, what does a washer look like that swings front to back? And inevitably, all their washers start just swinging a little bit front to back, front to back. Then I say, do it in clockwise circles, counterclockwise. And then I say, okay, now see if you can make that washer be completely still again. And what I'm emphasizing in this practice is, first of all, they're all amazed. They're thinking we just did something really hard and moving chairs across the room or something. And I tell them is the realization here is the micro expressions that happen as a result of our thoughts, in the sense that if I look at this washer that I'm holding in front of me and I start visualizing a washer moving at the tiniest level, the muscles in my arm and hand start doing what my mind is thinking. If I think about a washer swinging back and forth, washer does swinging back and forth, because while I can't see it in my hand, again, the micro expression is this swinging, and it shows itself at the bottom of the string in the washer going back and forth. And so what I tie that to, I say, okay, now if, and a lot of our kids play sports of some type, so I use sports as a reference a lot in this class, and I say, okay, imagine you're a basketball player and you go to the free throw line, and in your mind you say to yourself, oh my goodness, I'm so bad at basketball, I'm going to miss this shot. What is the micro expression that is occurring in your body? The thought was, I'm going to miss. So now what is your shot going to look like? Or what if you walk into a test for a classroom, walk into a classroom for a test, and you say, oh, I'm so dumb, I'm so bad at math, I'm going to fail this test. You're setting yourself up for failure just simply by the self talk. And so it's the beginning of the class that adds that self awareness component, to be aware of what we say to ourselves, combined with what is the physiological kind of output of our self talk. Or simply, if going back to what stresses us out, if we're feeling stressed physically, stopping for a moment, notice the physical feeling of anxiety, and then trying to backtrack a moment and say, what are my thoughts that might have caused this sense of anxiety? And then what was the moment before that? Acknowledging all of that exists. And like I said before with basketball, then letting it go and finding something that pulls you back into the present. I use the phrase a lot, like your anchor into the present. It's like throwing an anchor out of a boat that drops you into the present. What is your tool that in that moment lets those thoughts go, lets you be present, and lets you function with whatever you're doing? So that's day one of that class. And that's when it then progresses right on. We learn the second day, what is mindfulness? We define it in the John Kabat-Zinn way of simple, that present moment awareness of the present, and the key being non-judgmental awareness, kind of that open-hearted, open-minded awareness. We do the mindful eating practice on that second day, and that is, we use a gummy bear or a Swedish fish, one or the other, since that's gluten-free and no allergies in that one. For this class, for this age level, I've tried the raisin activity with kids. It works better with adults from what I've experienced. And so I stick with the gummy bear, single gummy bear. And we do that for about 20 minutes. And it's amazing what happens with these kids. And we get to the end of mindful eating. And I just ask them, I say, sit back and now shift your focus from what you just ate and ask yourself, what is the physical state of my body? And you can see them have this aha moment of, wow, I'm really relaxed right now. And it's not because of anything other than the fact that I paid attention to eating this gummy bear. And one of the best answers I ever got, because I always ask, what did you smell? What did you see? What did you touch? What did you feel? What did you taste? I actually did it with a fourth grade class once at our school. And my favorite answer of all time, I asked, what did you taste when you ate that gummy bear? And this one fourth grade boy was so excited, raised his hand. Then he forgot what the question was. And I'm thinking, oh, better let him off the hook. But then he came back to me and I said, okay, my question was, what did you taste? And he got this big smile on his face and he said, I tasted happiness.
That's a great answer. And I remember, as you've been telling us about the program, A couple of things came to mind in your presentation. You had a picture up of your students. There was a basketball game, and your kids were smiling. They were clearly having a blast. It was a great time. And that's when you were talking about how even when it's in a very stressful moment, we're still having fun. And on behalf of everyone who grew up K through 12 not having fun with sports, thank you for shifting that around for a lot of kids, because we weren't all so fortunate to have that kind of guidance where it's not that we don't still strive and try to win. Of course, we do that. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently. But we also need to be okay with cheering someone else in their success and being happy for them and enjoying it however it plays out. So thank you very much for doing that. And I also wanted to say, while you were describing the exercise with the string and the washers, that those micro movements, I'm wondering if you ever needed to guide someone who just got really attached to, no, we're telekinetics, we're Jedi now. If you ever just had to say, please go look up the idiomotor effect and see what this is about and what's actually going on.
The joy of teaching freshmen and the creativity that sometimes comes out. And there certainly are some that are adamant that they just did something magical. And yes, we do have to dive into the fact that no, what you think you do, much like if you're, and I always use dreaming as the example. Dreams are not real, but sometimes we wake ourselves up at night because we're kind of moving around. If we're dreaming that we're running, next thing we know, our legs might start kicking and we wake ourselves up. And it's the same notion, in my opinion, in the sense that the body believes what the mind tells it. And that is something that has to be clarified with the kids so that they're not going home telling their parents they just did some magic trick.
So, Alex, what have some of the challenges been over your experience in developing these programs that you're offering, not just to the students? Let me just remind people about that, but also to your fellow teachers.
The biggest challenge is probably, and it's usually, got to be honest, it's usually the adults that are the challenge, and they've all been very open-minded to it, and the ones that have come to it, and that's the key with what we do is, again, other than the freshman class as a requirement, with the adults, it is all voluntary in the sense that, hey, here's professional development. If you want it, come get it. So we're obviously getting a constituency that wants it when they come to it. But the one challenge is kind of, I'll just call it quick fix. They think it is a switch that you can flip, and that not they, and I don't mean everybody. There's certain individuals that just want a 5-minute explanation of it, and then they want to go do it in their class. And that's such a slippery slope of danger in the sense that I think so much of this practice, and it's something that I know John Kabat-Zinn emphasizes over and over and over, you have to have your own practice first. When we talk about like mindfulness in the classroom, I think a lot of the teachers, because of their use of teacher formats, if you go to a teacher professional development day, you're ready to walk out of that day with, these are the tools you're going to take to your classroom. When they come to me with the professional development, we work on them. And so they get there and like, wait a minute, I thought we were talking about the classroom. And we start with their experience of their own mindful practice so that they can figure out what it is that connects with them, because there are obviously a lot of different approaches. There are many doors to the same room of mindfulness. And that's what I want them to discover is what works best for them. But a number of them are ready again for, okay, tell me 5 things I can do in my classroom. And I don't believe you can do that. I think it's got to be, here is mindfulness. Here is a way to start your own practice. And once you get your own practice going, then think about things that will work in your classroom with your students, not just what, you can't pop open a book and go to page 32 and say, oh, that's the one we're going to do. Now, page 32 in a book speaks to you and it appropriately connects to your kids that you're teaching, then it's right. And that's where the books and all those things are very helpful, but they're not helpful without your own practice, because they're, especially with kids, kids are absolutely the best at picking up on authenticity, which also means they're the best at picking up on inauthenticity. And if you come in there and simply present something that you heard the day before, but is not part of your true practice. You've experienced the challenges yourself of sitting or walking or laying or eating and mindfully. And so that I would say is the number one challenge is making sure people have the patience to develop their own practice. I think for the most part, there's been an organic evolution to it to where the fact and even parents now, we're doing parent programming with it too. It has turned into a formulaic approach. It's so much more organic and authentic on every case by case situation rather than okay, time to push the mindfulness button. Yep, it worked. We're all good. The kind of the mass standardization of it in the sense that everybody has this same thing because we all have different experiences. And so I think it's important that we come to it from our own experience, but combined with the awareness of the people we're bringing it to. And so, long story short, the challenge is simply getting people to establish their own practice before bringing it to the classroom.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key points is the reason behind the necessity of that experience of having your own practice is because not only is each individual that you're helping with their own mindfulness practice completely unique, each moment they encounter is unique. And the only way to be versatile within that enormous complexity is having something firmly grounded in a great deal of experience. It's not something that you can just look up answer number 37. It's not that easy.
Because every situation is unique and every person is unique. You're exactly right. You almost can't plan for the things that arise, but it's when you have your own practice, it's almost like this light goes off in your head and it's like, now's the opportunity. And that's where our basketball team, I believe, would smile. They would see, you talked about a picture I showed. The picture I showed was of one of our players inbounding the ball on the sideline at an opponent's gym where the entire crowd, it almost looked like Duke's Cameron Indoor, the whole crowd is leaning over, yelling at him while the ref's handing him the ball, and he has the biggest smile on his face. And that was a game we upset that team, and it was funny because a parent of one of the players that happened like in the third quarter maybe, and I think we're down there too. The next day it was a tournament, as I said. I saw a parent that I didn't know of one of their players of the team we ended up beating that night came up to me and he said, "Coach, you know when I knew you had us beat?" He said, "When your player was after a timeout standing in front of our home crowd, smiling ear to ear the more they yelled at him. And you guys just played with joy." And he said, "That was when I knew you had us." And then again, we were losing at that point, and it was early enough in the game that it wasn't like a game decider. And the point being is when you have your own practice, a teacher who then gets challenged in the classroom, if they can smile at the challenge, even if it's an internal smile, because not all the time is it appropriate to smile if you need to be stern or whatever it is in the classroom situation, but internally smile at the opportunity to bring mindfulness into this moment and watch what happens from there. It's not tied to an expectation of, I'm going to be mindful and this is going to work. It's simply, I'm going to be mindful. And more times than not, it does end up working out. And that's where the uniqueness of the person and the uniqueness of the situation is where the two elements come together if you have your own practice. You smile in the face of adversity figuratively because that is your opportunity to be present.
Alex, what are some of the other stories that are inspiring you to continue to do this work?
One of the quotes that I got from a lower school teacher, because I have, fill out, a 5-point scale of their experience of the class with a series of questions. And I also asked for anecdotal information. And one of the quotes that was so helpful to me was that mindfulness, this teacher said anonymously, so I don't know who it is, but I do know as a lower school teacher, she said, mindfulness is the first thing that I've ever brought to my classroom where I not only didn't have to take anything away, it enhanced everything I was already doing. And so what that means to a teacher is so often, and again, I love the profession of teaching, but there's a new thing every day. Oh, here's the new computer program. Here's the new thing you need to teach. Here's the new curriculum. Here's the new this. And it's all well intended, but you get inundated with the next best new thing. And initially the thought was, oh no, what's this mindfulness thing? And then when they do it and they experience it, they're like, wait a minute, taking a few minutes to practice mindfulness with my students in the classroom doesn't cause me to lose time. They're all thinking, well, there's no time to this, right? There's no time to do this. The class is short enough. They find that it enhances the rest of the time. So if you have a 5-minute class and you spend 3 minutes doing mindfulness to start the class, what teachers are finding is the next 42 minutes are fantastic as a result of kind of all tuning in together the way an orchestra would before playing a symphony. And those moments where teachers realize that stopping is actually the best place to start. That feedback is so rewarding because then you hear it from the students as well as the teachers and the parents. You'll hear one experience that occurred in a classroom, but I'll hear it anecdotally from 3 different perspectives and all speak of it in a way that is, again, like the guy smiling in the basketball game. It's a pretty beautiful experience.
Well, our guest today has been Alex Peavey, and we've been talking about the Mindful Living program at Collegiate School in Richmond, Virginia. You can find out more about Alex and his work on the website, which is linked on the episode page for this episode. Alex, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.